inputs from districts and so on. So these states like Kerala, Telangana, Karnataka, and even Punjab have so much of credit going into the sector. And in these states, more than 100%, I said, but other states like UP, Bihar, Rajasthan, West Bengal, Chhattisgarh, which have very, very high predominance of marginal and small farmers, don't even get complete coverage of input costs. Yeah. If you're not aware, in states like UP and Bihar, more than 90% of the farmers fall in the category of marginal or small. So very large chunk of the small farmers get excluded or does not get adequate credit because they are placed in certain states where this is not as high as it should be. So this is, again, we have to relate to it to the structure of the credit, that 2/3 of this, I said earlier, is formal credit, and of that, almost 3/4 is by the commercial banks now. Cooperatives are only 1/4. So the formal banking system is delivering it this way. Yeah, we don't even need to talk about the informal right now. If you go further, now this latest NABARD survey has found that almost half of the so-called agricultural households don't borrow. Yeah, they don't borrow simply. They either don't have access or don't believe in taking loans, or are just not found fit by anybody to give them anything. So you have then remaining half who borrow. And if you look at the categories or segments, 46% of marginal and 31% of small don't borrow. Yeah, so when we said 48, we are talking about a very good proportion of those who actually need to borrow but don't borrow. Yeah, whereas in the case of large farmers, only 4% don't borrow. Maybe they don't need, not because they don't get access to it. Yeah, and 20% of medium. So this is the kind of picture you have before you. Who doesn't borrow? Yeah, and even in the informal sector, it's 53% and 27% for marginal and small versus 16% and 4% of medium and large, who don't borrow even from non-formal sector or informal or non-institutional sector. On the other hand, if you look at the formal system, 2/3, now leave out the 1/3 or 1/2 as per this data. Formal sector share, marginal and small, only 17 and 25% borrow. And I mentioned earlier, their population is 85, but only about 42% borrow from the formal sector. Yeah, and marginal 100% of total loans from formal sector. Yeah, the rest, majority is still informal or non-institutional loans, 51%, as against only 21% of the loans of large farmer being from informal sector. You can see the disparity. Yeah. Now the other big thing, now I tell you, because of course this is policy point, but I can attend to him before I forget. That is that though we have priority sector norm, which we'll rush through if we have time, I call it a kind of small practice, not a very good practice, because each bank, when it is not able to meet the priority sector target of 13.5% being only for agriculture, yeah, directly, and rest indirectly for agriculture, which now RBI changed to, we will talk about that also, that the system has now allowed those banks which fall behind in meeting this target to buy priority sector loan accounts from other banks which has exceeded it, so that they could also meet PSL target and go without any penalty. Of course, we earlier have the system of banks, if they're not able to lend enough to farmers, putting that money into RIDF, Rural Infrastructure Development Fund under NABARD. So some of these things we need to think through, whether they are helping better institutional access to credit or actually compromising on that. Who borrows from where? A little bit more than we move further on it. If you have land, you have better chances of borrowing from institutional sources. If you have formal agriculture training and exposure, you have much better chances than the others. If you are SC or ST, you have lower chances of borrowing from institutional sources. If you are from a minority community, you have lower chances. If you are illiterate, this is a common sense actually, but done through a statistical analysis. If you are aware of MSP, then you have better chances. If you are associated with an NGO organized farmer agency or producer agency, self-help group or cooperative or producer company or whatever, then you have better chances of getting access to formal sector credit. Yeah. Now let's come to one other major thing which is talked about all the time: Kisan credit cards. Giving a cash credit limit to farmers like industry gets, saying that you are free to make use of money. I give you this money in your account, you withdraw whenever you want in one go or 10 times during the season. Now only 10% household had valid KCC, which was not sort of barred or not restricted to use because you have defaulted and so on. So only 10%. The coverage may be very high, but only 10% of these KCCs were operational where farmer could actually use it. Now this scheme has been with us for the last 22 years. Started in 1998, and you get loan at 4% interest. And so farmers who had it, they used only 70% of the limit they could, for whatever reasons. Yeah. But farmers, unlike other cash credit limit users, has to pay both interest and principal in order to remain or become eligible to borrow again. In other cases, you can just pay interest and you can continue to borrow. Here, farmer has to clear, and many times just a book adjustment. Yeah, primary agriculture cooperative societies were much more inclusive of those marginalized groups like scheduled castes or small or marginal farmers, because they are local level. They are local level. They are well established. They are at the village level or the panchayat level, and almost every producing farmer can be a member there. Unlike a bank branch, which may be at the district or taluka or bigger village level, where even going every time comes an issue. Commercial banks, as I mentioned earlier, only about 40% were covered who were small or marginal, and somehow poor ended up paying higher interest. So not only you don't get access, when you get access, your cost is higher than others. Yeah, I'm not talking about transaction cost, I'm talking about interest costs. Yeah. Further, the focus is still only on crops. Yeah. We kept saying that crop cultivation is not anymore a major source of income, even for small and marginal farmers, but most of the loans are still for the crop sector, allied sector getting only less than 10%. And it's only now, this last budget, that Kisan credit card scheme has become applicable to allied sectors of fisheries, dairy, poultry, livestock, and so on. And I want to share one anecdote with you here that to me, it was a shock that in this country, even this kind of things happen. That in Odisha, when tribal farmers have some surplus from whatever sources of crop or non-timber forest products or wage work, if they have to save keep their money, they give it to some local shahukar, whoever it is, and that person charges interest to the farmer for safekeeping of his money. All of us get interest on our savings, but here when somebody is trying to save at the local level, in the informal sector, he or she ends up actually paying for that rather than earning on that plus one has. So even this is, I was quite shocked to learn this. I can share that paper with you if you are interested. But even credits cooperative societies also not very equitable. One, that PACs work better in some than others. PACs are expanding and doing well in some regions more than in other regions. Crop versus investment loans, even in cooperative sector, it's more about crop loans. Crop-wise credit share. Now, I told you the scale of finance. It is determined for each crop and separately for each state. And many crops which are high value, they have very high, for example, potato. It costs you about 30 to 40,000 rupees to produce 1 acre of potato. Sugar cane similarly. These crops take a large chunk of the money because the scale of finance is higher for these crops. So if you take a who grows which crop, for example, it may be new information for some of you. In India, only 5% farmers grow cotton, right? And only 10 states grow cotton. Similarly, what percentage of farmers grow sugarcane in this country? So this kind of, how many farmers grow grapes or other high value crops? These crops are very high scale of finance. So they take large chunk of the money which is meant for crop sector. So that leads to sort of concentration of credit in fewer hands. And of course, land holding wise also, bigger gets more because you have per acre limits set there. Yeah, which is skip some of these aspects of borrower profile because this is from the state of Punjab. But picture is more or less similar, basically saying that cooperatives, though used very well by local farmers, are losing their share. Commercial banks are the most predominant players now. Regional rural banks are stuck right from the beginning, not able to even achieve 10%. So we have that kind of scenario. Lot of it is also related to collateral. That a lot of formal institutions still want credit collateral to be given, despite the RBI mandate, which was given 10 years back, saying that up to 50,000 rupees, you don't need to ask for a collateral. But I'm not aware any bank which is respecting this mandate. They still want some collateral, and many times it is the land which is taken as a collateral. That's why the tenant farmers who don't have land ownership do not become eligible to get crop loans because they can't give collateral in the form of land. So what are the issues? One, we are saying that the adequacy may be there at the macro level, but it is not there at the micro or segment level or regional level for different borrowers. Price, we all know about it. Whether in crops there is this extra cost which farmer has to bear. Time taken to process, many times you don't get it on time. Yeah, by the time you get it, it's too late already. This results in higher transaction cost, though interest rate to begin with may have been lower for the formal sector borrowers, 0, 1%, 3%, whatever. But by the time you end up availing that loan, you have actually incurred much more cost and maybe also lost the opportunity to make a good use of that money for the purpose you wanted it. Inflexible repayment schedules, standard unit approach, no consumption loans. I mentioned the reverse interest rate. A lot of it happens because the banks are not able to provide consumption loans. Yeah. And this, please remember, after we're talking about the farmer producer, all this happens in the presence of high production risk and very high marketing risk for the farmers. as we have seen during this season. This is of course exceptional, but even otherwise, when farmers have to sell, markets don't deliver. When farmers have to buy, markets do all kinds of, I call it, mistreatment of farmers. So if we are looking at what is a quality product in agricultural credit market, if we have to deliver it, it's about adequate amount of loan, timely availability, reasonable cost. One is not saying give it free, but reasonable cost going by the purpose for its being used, repayment schedule, and flexible uses. Of course, KCC gives that entire flexibility, but then we know how many have been able to make use of it. I would skip this. We talked about this. I have a lot of slides on how this distortion has happened, policy distortion. I would just highlight a few of them. This is the chronology of how we have moved into this whole domain of priority sector lending. Yeah, with the PACs and then RRB, then NABARD, then RIDF, then SHG Bank linkage, and so on. Then business correspondents for the last decade, and then of course green farm waivers and so on. Now, why are we in a situation where we are got large-scale exclusion of the real intended stakeholder or the beneficiary, large-scale of rural branches after the liberalization in the 1990s? Yeah, so banks which were viable. This led to regional imbalances as well as sharp flow in the flow of credit to agriculture, because when you are not there, how does one borrow from you? Yeah, increasing sidelining of small and marginal farmer because of this fear of loan waivers and defaults in the expectation of loan waivers. Yeah, because it all, any loan waiver starts with the plight of small and marginal farmers. So it's a different matter. Ultimately, it may not reach them when it's done. So that and strengthening of hold on money lenders increased once the banks withdrew from local scenario, or PACs became weakened because of lack of government support. And the more important part is how the banking sector defined and implemented priority sector lending. There were direct and indirect. Earlier, only direct was part of priority, even indirect, that is lending to cold storages, warehouses, food processing units, and other infrastructure and other kind of business projects also became part of 18%. Yeah. Then later on, even indirect credit over and above, earlier it was restricted to 1/4 of the total advances. Even if you exceeded that, that also became part of the overall priority sector, which is 40%, which includes education and so on, housing and all that. Yeah. Then came the RIDF facility to meet the priority sector, that if you are not able to lend, give it to us, we will put it for rural infrastructure development under NABARD. All loans to plantation sector also became part of direct. Now we know plantation is an industry. In India, it is not traditionally part of farm sector. Your plantations are more like industry. There are labor laws, which are separate plantation labor act. Some of the planters also pay income tax, unlike farmers in the farm sector who don't pay any income tax. So that was also brought in as part of the direct loans to agriculture in 1997. Now the tractor story. We all know that 90% tractors in this country have been bought on bank loans under priority sector. But as I mentioned earlier, like sugarcane or cotton, only 5% farmers in this country own tractors. And the understanding is that only that many can own tractors. Others simply can't afford to own such a big machine, that too by borrowing. And 0.5% farmers have combined harvesters, mostly in Punjab, Haryana, and maybe Western UP. And this lending to tractors, our tractors, has led to what is called over-tractorization of the farm sector, but under-mechanization of the sector. These are the pictures from second-hand tractor markets in Punjab, which I've been looking at for some time now. You go to any taluka headquarter in the Malwa region of Punjab, Batinda, Sangarur, Barnala, Faridkot, Moga, and so on, you will find thousands of tractors brought in by thousands of farmers every week or fortnight, which are second-hand tractors which they want to either or exchange for a cheaper one, or they bought a tractor for something other than the productive purpose for it, maybe daughter's wedding or son's wedding or son's education or whatever. So that I think, or I sort of perceive as a sign of crisis and sign of how we have lent for agri mechanization in the sector. These are the sort of a few more pictures from there with model and price of the tractor written on the silencer and all that. Moving on further, deregulation of interest rates of cooperative RRBs, deregulation lending rates of commercial banks for loans above 2 lakhs, yeah, and many other led to the focus on the farm sector or the production. Agri clinics and agri business centers also became part of indirect advances in 2001. Regional electricity corporations bonds also became part of indirect finance. NBFC loans also became from 2000 part of the indirect finance for agriculture and the priority sector. Warehouse and cold storage also from 2002, irrespective of location. Yeah, state electricity board loans also under this from 2005, and upper limits for indirect finance raised from 15 lakhs to 25 lakhs to 40 lakhs by 2004. Now it may be a crore. Yeah, go on and on. I just highlighting a few. There are so many distortions which has happened in terms of policy change, which have led banks to move away from the real needy farmers or small producers. In 2015, actually, RBI said we don't want to talk with direct indirect because it's creating a lot of trouble. So we would rather now define categories as farm credit, agri-infra credit, and ancillary activity credit. Yeah, and then they came out with another mandate which was like based on the fact that marginal and small are being excluded by the formal sector credit. They said now out of the 13.5%, you would spare 8%, that is half of it, only for lending to marginal and small farmers. This is also with us now, this policy to refocus on small and marginal. I'll skip this, basically this showing the marginalization of the cooperative sector and RRBs and the commercial banks taking over the entire stuff. Smaller loans up to 25,000 declined from 35% to 13% within 6 years in the first 6 years of last decade. Yeah, smaller loans up to 2 lakhs were only 40%. Yeah, 13% loans were of more than 1 crore each. Kind of agriculture are we talking about here? Yeah, small borrower accounts themselves went down from 62% in the early 90s to 38% in the last decade itself. Bigger loans of more than 1 crore, I mentioned, increased to 13-14%, to 30% now. Yeah, yeah, the share of the number of accounts. Looking at this, we are increasingly seeing the focus being diluted from lending directly to farm producers and managing this priority sector target by lending around agriculture. Now, just a couple of points before I come to what is the way out. We know that people fall into poverty. A large chunk of the tenants, marginal small farmers are part of the poor or people just above the poverty line who can fall into poverty anytime. Yeah, high healthcare costs, social expenses, and importantly, high interest private sector loans stay away. Yeah, so unless we attend to this, many of the other things we are thinking of in terms of improving farmer well-being or welfare will not be possible. Yeah. On the other hand, people who escape poverty, they could do so because they could diversify their income sources. Like I keep saying that if you are talking about increasing farmer income, and if 60% of the farmers' cropped areas under wheat and paddy, how do you really increase farmer income? We know the yield limits to these crops. So there are some yield gaps in some states. We know the MSP limit to the prices. We know the fixed cost which happen or the cost of cultivation which is there. There's very little scope to cut down those. So how do you really jump to double or triple of the income they have now, unless you move to crops and enterprises which are high value? the information about new opportunities and networking help people to earn more or less, spend less, and more importantly, reasonably priced production and consumption. If they could get access to that, they could escape poverty. Now, just last 5 minutes, what are the policy options for us to expand institutional credit? I'm proposing about 10 measures. One could be swapping the debt of marginal and small farmers. Those are borrowed from institutional sources, non-institutional sources, to making it institutional by the institutional sector taking it over and saying, now you will our borrow, we will take care of your debt from the non-institutional sector, so that they could get out of that trap of interlocked product and sector markets. The second is, but this needs a small nudge, that there is this provision. Free lending has been instructed up to 2 lakhs, up 50,000 already by the RBI. If we increase it up to 2 lakh, then we can make a lot of people eligible to get these loans. And you should not go by whether somebody owns land or other assets or not. You should go by what enterprise one is involved in or what crop the farmer is growing. So you lend a few tens of thousands to that person, collateral free. It's not going to such a big bad deal. Yeah. Third is, you should enhance this quota not only for small and marginal, but also tenant farmers, about how they could be brought in from 8 to 10%. Yeah, 2/3 of loans should be meant for, because they need it. Many other categories of farmers can do without it, can borrow from other sources, don't need to borrow perhaps. So unless you raise this, because when you're bringing tenants, you're bringing another set of cultivators into picture, especially bottom 60%, who are less than 1 acre operators or owners. Yeah. Importantly, in terms of regional focus on central India, eastern India, and northeastern states. They have very low penetration of formal sector. We have excellent opportunities since last 10 years in terms of Warehouse Receipts Act, under which farmer need not do distress sale if he or she could get loans against the produce by storing this in a warehouse. We have this kind of pictures from Bihar. I was pleasantly surprised that there is this agri startup which has been able to put up with the local farmers' money a warehouse which small farmers are able to use now. So that is a doable thing, and that can really break this interlocking which we are talking about. Value chain financing. It's not lending to individual farmers or producers. If you are able to map their backward and forward linkages and rope in the other stakeholders in the chain who buy or sell to them, then you have not only better chances of reaching the intended beneficiaries, but also better repayment. Because we're lending to an institution, not necessarily to so many millions of small and marginal farmers. So that is another important sort of development we need to go into. Today also there's a lot of talk about this. A group of ministers have recommended something on land leasing laws. Punjab has drafted a land leasing bill late last year. Reform leasing laws to provide for written lease agreement. Now the problem with Niti Aayog Model Act and Punjab Draft Act is that they say agreement is optional. No, if you're bringing an act, how can you leave it to chance? Everybody who's leasing in or leasing out has to have a formal agreement, and that agreement can be used to do financing of leasing or lessee farmers formally. Yeah. So that Andhra Pradesh had tried the Licensed Cultivators Act without doing this, and that didn't work. So if we get into this thing, that can really facilitate, because we know anywhere between 10 to 50% of the land across different states of India is cultivated by non-owners, either sharecroppers or cash lease based operators. So we really want to push credit for farm production, then we should bring them in. It's a long pending issue, and this is one way of doing it. More importantly, when you're talking about credit. Credit cannot be thought of independent of the farmer situation. If farmer is not able to